Have you ever wondered what would happen if someone with everything met someone with almost nothing? What choices would they make in that moment of truth? Stay with me until the end to discover how one unexpected encounter changed two lives forever in ways no one could have predicted. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more life-changing stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Marcus Johnson's eyes snapped open in terror. The leather chair he'd fallen asleep in was impossibly soft, nothing like the hard plastic chairs at the hospital where he'd spent most nights this month. For a moment, disorientation clouded his mind before the horrifying reality crashed down on him. He had fallen asleep in the executive office he was supposed to be cleaning. The office of Eleanor Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, and one of the wealthiest women in the country. The digital clock on her immaculate desk read 5:47 a.m. His shift had ended at 2 a.m. Marcus scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had been working double shifts for weeks now, cleaning offices by night and doing odd jobs by day, anything to cover his daughter Lily's mounting medical bills. Last night, the exhaustion had finally caught up with him. He had sat down for just a moment in the plush leather chair, and now here he was, hours later, still in the CEO's private office. He grabbed his cleaning cart, praying he could slip out unnoticed before the early executives arrived. But as he turned toward the door, it swung open. Eleanor Blackwood stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit despite the early hour. Her piercing blue eyes widened slightly, the only indication of surprise on her otherwise composed face. I'm so sorry, Miss Blackwood," Marcus stammered, his voice hoarse with fear. "I was cleaning and I didn't mean to." Eleanor raised a hand, silencing him. At 45, she had built her tech empire from the ground up, earning a reputation for ruthless efficiency. The business world called her the Ice Queen for her uncompromising standards and emotional detachment. Marcus had heard the rumors from other cleaning staff, how she had fired executives for being 5 minutes late to meetings, how she never accepted excuses. "Your name?" she asked, her voice cool and measured. "Marcus Johnson, ma'am. I work for Summit Cleaning Services. I've been assigned to this floor for about 6 months now." His hands trembled as he gripped the handle of his cart. This job was one of 3 he was working to keep a roof over his daughter's head and to pay for her treatments. Losing it would be catastrophic. Eleanor's gaze swept over him, taking in his worn uniform, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his body seemed to sway slightly from exhaustion even as he stood at attention. Then her eyes moved to something on his cart, a small framed photograph taped to the inside. A little girl with a bright smile and a colorful headscarf. "And who is that?" she asked, nodding toward the photo. Marcus swallowed hard. "My daughter, Lily. She's 8. Something imperceptible shifted in Eleanor's expression. "Follow me, Mr. Johnson." His stomach dropped. This was it. She was taking him to security, or worse, straight to her HR department to terminate his contract. He followed her silently through the executive floor to a small conference room. She gestured for him to sit, then closed the door. "When was the last time you slept in a bed, Mr. Johnson?" she asked, remaining standing. The unexpected question caught him off guard. 3 days ago, maybe? I've been at the hospital, most nights. When I'm not there, I'm working. The hospital." It wasn't a question, but her tone invited explanation. Marcus hadn't planned to share his story with anyone, least of all Eleanor Blackwood. But exhaustion had worn away his defenses, and the words spilled out before he could stop them. "Lily has leukemia. She was diagnosed 8 months ago. Her mother? She couldn't handle it. Left us both 6 months back." He stared at his calloused hands. "The insurance covers some, but not enough. Not nearly enough." Eleanor was silent for so long that Marcus finally looked up. Her face remained impassive, but something in her eyes had changed, a distant look, as though she were seeing something beyond the walls of the conference room. "How many jobs are you working, Mr. Johnson?" 3, sometimes 4 when I can pick up day labor on weekends." She nodded once decisively. "Wait here." Eleanor left the room, closing the door behind her. Marcus sat frozen, uncertain whether he should prepare to be escorted from the building or simply fired on the spot. Through the glass walls, he could see her speaking to her assistant who had just arrived. The assistant's eyes widened at whatever instruction Eleanor was giving, but she nodded and hurried away. 10 minutes later, Eleanor returned with a folder and placed it on the table between them. "Mr. Johnson, I'm offering you a position as my personal assistant." Marcus blinked, certain he had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "The position pays $95,000 annually, with full benefits that would cover your daughter's medical expenses. The insurance plan is comprehensive and includes specialized pediatric care." She slid the folder toward him. "The job requires organization, discretion, and the ability to anticipate needs before they're expressed. Based on your personnel file, you've never missed a shift in 6 months despite your circumstances, and your supervisor notes that you're meticulous and thorough." Marcus stared at her, speechless. This had to be some kind of cruel joke. "Ms. Blackwood, I don't have a college degree. I don't have any experience as an assistant. You have life experience, Mr. Johnson, and something far more valuable, motivation." For the first time, her expression softened slightly. "I need someone who understands the value of opportunity. But why would you—" 25 years ago, Eleanor interrupted, "I was a single mother working 3 jobs. My daughter, Sophie, had a congenital heart condition. One night I fell asleep on a bench at the hospital and was awakened by the chief of cardiology. Instead of having me removed, he offered me a job in hospital administration that included insurance for Sophie." She straightened her already perfect posture. "I'm not in the habit of explaining my decisions, Mr. Johnson, but sometimes life presents us with moments of symmetry that shouldn't be ignored." Marcus felt tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. He blinked them back, unwilling to break down in front of this woman who held his future in her hands. "What happened to your daughter?" he asked softly. A shadow passed over Eleanor's face. "Sophie received the care she needed. She's now a pediatric surgeon in Boston." A pause. "We don't speak much these days. My dedication to building this company came at a cost." Before Marcus could respond, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at him. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes. You have until then to decide. If you accept, you'll start tomorrow. Your first task will be to arrange for your daughter to be transferred to Memorial Children's Hospital, where Dr. Abigail Chen heads the pediatric oncology department. She's the best in the country." She stood to leave, then hesitated. "One more thing, Mr. Johnson. If you accept this position, I expect excellence. This is not charity, it's an investment. I believe you have potential that circumstances have prevented you from realizing. Don't prove me wrong." With that, she left him alone with the folder containing an employment contract that would change his life. Marcus did accept the position, though not without trepidation. The transition from night cleaner to executive assistant was jarring. The first weeks were a blur of learning protocols, mastering new software, systems, and adjusting to a world where people looked him in the eye instead of through him. All while spending every available moment with Lily, who had indeed been transferred to Memorial Children's under Dr. Chen's care. Eleanor was as demanding as her reputation suggested. She expected Marcus to anticipate her needs, to have answers before she asked questions, to manage her complex schedule with military precision. She rarely offered praise, but her absence of criticism became its own form of approval. What surprised Marcus most, however, was how she never mentioned finding him asleep in her office. It was as if that vulnerable moment had been sealed away, acknowledged only through the opportunity it had created. 1 month into his new position, Marcus was organizing Eleanor's schedule when he noticed a recurring appointment labeled simply SB every 3rd Thursday, blocked for 2 hours, with no location specified. When he asked Eleanor about it, her typically composed expression faltered for just a moment. "That's personal," she said curtly. "You don't need to concern yourself with it." But Marcus had become attuned to the subtle shifts in Eleanor's demeanor, the slight tightening around her eyes when she was stressed, the barely perceptible softening of her voice when something mattered deeply to her. This mattered. The following Thursday, curiosity got the better of him. He followed Eleanor at a discreet distance as she left the office for her mysterious appointment. To his surprise, she drove herself rather than using her usual car service, taking her sleek black Tesla to a modest coffee shop in a quiet neighborhood far from the corporate towers of downtown. Through the window, Marcus watched as Eleanor sat across from a young woman with the same striking blue eyes and regal posture, Sophie Blackwood, the daughter she had mentioned that first morning. The conversation appeared strained, with long silences and tight smiles. After less than 30 minutes, Sophie stood, gave her mother a brief formal hug, and left. Eleanor remained seated, staring into her untouched coffee for several minutes before composing herself and returning to her car. Marcus hurried back to the office, arriving well before Eleanor. When she returned, her face was a perfect mask of professional detachment, but he noticed the redness around her eyes that even her expert makeup couldn't quite conceal. That evening, as Marcus sat beside Lily's hospital bed reading her favorite story, he found himself thinking about Eleanor and Sophie, about how success and sacrifice were so often intertwined, about how easy it was to lose sight of what mattered most when fighting for survival. "Daddy," Lily asked, interrupting his thoughts, "why does Ms. Blackwood never smile in the pictures on her website? Is she sad?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, surprised. "You looked up Ms. Blackwood?" Lily nodded, her thin fingers playing with the edge of her blanket. "I wanted to see the lady who gave you your new job. She looks like she needs a friend." Out of the mouths of babes. Marcus kissed Lily's forehead, marveling at her perception. "I think maybe she does, sweetheart." The next day, Marcus placed a small framed drawing on Eleanor's desk before she arrived. A colorful picture Lily had created, showing two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. One tall figure labeled Ms. B, and one small one labeled Lily. At the bottom, in Lily's careful handwriting, "Thank you for helping my daddy help me." When Eleanor arrived and saw the drawing, she stood motionless, staring at it for so long that Marcus began to worry he had overstepped. Then, without a word, she carefully picked it up and placed it on the shelf behind her desk, positioned so she could see it while she worked. That afternoon, Eleanor did something unprecedented. She left the office early, instructing Marcus to clear her schedule for the remainder of the day. She offered no explanation, and he asked for none. The next morning, Eleanor arrived with a small gift bag that she placed on Marcus's desk. "For Lily," she said simply before continuing to her office. Inside, Marcus found a beautiful leather-bound journal with Lily's name embossed on the cover. The note inside read, "For your stories and dreams, the world needs to hear them both." That small exchange marked a subtle shift in their professional relationship. Eleanor remained demanding and exacting, but moments of humanity began to break through her carefully constructed facade. She asked about Lily's treatments. She adjusted Marcus's schedule without being asked when Lily had difficult days. Once, she even accompanied him to the hospital when Lily had a particularly frightening reaction to a new medication, sitting silently in the waiting room until the doctors confirmed she was stable. 3 months into Marcus's new position, Dr. Chen delivered the news they had been hoping for. Lily was responding exceptionally well to treatment. Her cancer was in retreat. For the first time since her diagnosis, the doctor used the word optimistic. That evening, overwhelmed with gratitude, Marcus wrote Eleanor a letter he never intended to deliver, thanking her not just for the job and the insurance, but for showing him that strength and vulnerability could coexist. That second chances came in unexpected forms, that kindness could be expressed through opportunity rather than pity. He left the letter in his desk drawer, a private expression of gratitude. But the next morning he arrived to find his desk had been moved during a minor office reconfiguration. The drawer had been emptied, its contents placed in a box for him to reorganize. The letter was gone. Marcus spent the day in a state of quiet panic, wondering if Eleanor had read his unfiltered thoughts, his emotional gratitude that now seemed embarrassingly effusive in the cold light of day. But Eleanor gave no indication that anything had changed. She was her usual efficient self, focused entirely on the quarterly reports they were preparing. It wasn't until a week later that Marcus found the letter again, or rather found evidence that Eleanor had indeed read it. While organizing files in her office, he noticed a familiar piece of paper tucked into her personal planner. The corner of his letter, just visible enough to be recognizable. She had kept it. That same day, Eleanor asked Marcus to schedule a dinner meeting with a potential client. When he pulled up her calendar, he noticed that the recurring SB appointment had changed. It now read Sophie and Lily, Memorial Garden Cafe, the location where Lily often had lunch when visiting the hospital for outpatient treatment. "Ms. Blackwood," Marcus began carefully, "I noticed the change in your Thursday appointment. Does this mean—" Sophie expressed interest in meeting Lily, Eleanor said, not looking up from her computer. She mentioned that pediatric cardiology and oncology often collaborate on research. "I thought it might be beneficial for all parties." Marcus understood what wasn't being said. Eleanor had shared his letter with her daughter, had perhaps used his words to bridge whatever gap had grown between them over years of prioritizing business over family. "I'm sure Lily would love that," he said simply. Eleanor nodded once the matter settled. The following Thursday, Marcus brought Lily to the hospital cafe. Unsure what to expect, they found Eleanor already seated with a younger woman who had her same commanding presence but with a warmth in her eyes that Eleanor rarely revealed. "Lily, this is Dr. Sophie Blackwood," Eleanor said, her voice carrying an unusual softness. "And Sophie, this is Lily Johnson and her father, Marcus." Sophie smiled warmly at Lily. "I've heard you're quite the fighter, Lily. My mother speaks very highly of you." Lily beamed, looking from Sophie to Eleanor with delight. "Your mom is helping my dad help me get better. And my dad is helping your mom with important business stuff." Sophie's eyebrows rose slightly as she glanced at her mother. "Is that so?" Eleanor's expression remained composed, but Marcus caught the faintest hint of color in her cheeks. "Mr. Johnson has proven to be an exceptional assistant," she said evenly. "He anticipates needs before they're expressed," Sophie said, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "A quality you've always valued." The lunch was filled with easy conversation, primarily driven by Lily's endless questions for Sophie about being a doctor, and for Eleanor about running a company. As they were finishing, Sophie pulled out her phone to show Lily pictures of her own daughter, Eleanor's 5-year-old granddaughter, Emma, whom Eleanor had mentioned only once in passing. "Maybe next time Emma could join us," Sophie suggested, looking directly at her mother. "She's been asking about her grandmother." Eleanor's composure slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of longing so intense it was almost painful to witness. "I would like that very much," she said quietly. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor handed Lily a small box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny chair. "To remember where this all began," Eleanor said, her eyes meeting Marcus's over Lily's head. 6 months after that fateful morning, when Eleanor had found Marcus sleeping in her office chair, Lily's doctors confirmed she was in remission. The road ahead would still require vigilance and follow-up care, but the immediate danger had passed. That same week, Eleanor promoted Marcus to Director of Community Outreach, a newly created position to manage Blackwood Enterprises' expanding philanthropic initiatives, including a substantial new program supporting families of children with serious illnesses. "You've earned this," Eleanor told him, when he protested that he wasn't qualified. "Your perspective is precisely what this position requires." At the formal announcement of the new initiative, Eleanor did something unprecedented. She shared her own story publicly for the first time. She spoke about being a struggling single mother, about Sophie's childhood illness, about the opportunity that had changed their lives, and about how finding Marcus asleep in her office had reminded her of what truly mattered. "Success isn't measured by what we accumulate," she said, her voice steady despite the personal nature of her words. "It's measured by what we give back, by the